Hi, this is Catherine Henry, and I'm here today with two special guests on our program about new reality technology. Now, we have had a couple of people join us last week. It was a really exciting conversation with Joanna Poppins, Justin Bolognino, and Saul Rogers of Rewind, who were talking to us about some of the opportunities they saw for new platforms and new technologies under this COVID crisis to help us work, create, collaborate, and communicate more effectively. As part of the ongoing series, I have with me two guests today. We have Jeremy Dalton from PwC. He's head of the EMEA region, and Pearly Chen, who joins us from HTC. Of course, one of the challenges that we in VR or XR generally see is that most companies really don't know how to implement VR, and they don't really necessarily see the benefit because, of course, there is a cost. But as we face the challenge to be more effective and collaborate from a distance, VR is a very obvious solution and one which really ought to be explored. So to help you in your considerations, these two guests are going to give us some guidance as to how they have used it with their respective clients and some of the insights as to the new services that will soon be available. So I'm going to introduce my first guest, Jeremy Dalton. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, Catherine.
Jeremy, I'm thrilled to have you here because one of the things that I wanted to do was make sure that this is an international conference, or rather call, that involves multiple guests who can give us different perspectives as to how VR, AR, XR is being implemented around the world. You are head of the major region, and you recently had a wonderful conference with your colleagues from around the world. I wonder if you could also tell us about that. And also about your Seeing is Believing report. I thought that was very effective in talking about the VR ecosystem generally. So maybe we can start off with talking with the big picture about VR and where it's going, and perhaps a bit more information about where we're headed. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. What I'll do first, though, is I will address the elephant in the room with regard to COVID-19. So the Seeing is Believing report that we produced back in and released in November 2019 did not take into account specifically the crisis that has now unfolded throughout the world. If I can share my screen at the moment, let me bring that up for you. We've got some news, there it is, that's come out of our economics team just this morning, in fact, about the impact of COVID-19 on a number of these industries. Now, what you're seeing here is in the gray bars are showing the impact of COVID-19 on these industries on the left-hand side. If we were to have a shorter lockdown, and the bars expand to the red or orange area, it may appear on the screen, if we're in a more longer term lockdown. So those results will be exacerbated, basically. So it's not pleasant reading in the sense that the food service industry, the hotels industry, transport industry in particular, being hit very hard by COVID-19. Alternatively, there are also sectors like education, public administration, defense, health and social care that have in fact are seeing more value added as a result of the current crisis, which is interesting in itself. Now, UK GDP, depending on whether there's a shorter or longer lockdown, is expected to take a turn for the worse and get hit fairly hard. The good news, though, is that over the long term, we can expect to see a recovery. So as we go into at the moment, Q4 of this year, Q1 of next year, we should start to see a return to normality as if the COVID-19 disease hadn't hit us so hard. So that's the good news, at least, and is one of the reasons why this report that we put together around the impact of VR and AR, the Seeing is Believing report, is still valid in terms of its long-term view of the contributions of virtual reality and augmented reality to the worldwide economy. In its worst case, we're talking about a shift of these numbers, not necessarily hitting in 2030, but maybe being shunted by the duration of this crisis and its impact in the world. So to go straight to the economic impact itself, seeing is believing. What we did initially is we came together, the PwC virtual reality team, the economics team, a number of external analysts, as well as VR/AR stakeholders in industry. And we said to ourselves, what are the real use cases for this technology? So where is VR and AR being used in business right now? And these are the elements that we came up with at a high level. And so we've got organizational meetings, design, visualization, and building on the left-hand side. And this relates to product and service development. We've got healthcare as a sector in itself. We've got development and training, massive use cases there. And we've got process improvements, and finally, retail and consumer. Now, a lot of these you may have heard about before. Some of the less obvious ones I will pick up now. So, for example, process improvements. By this, we're talking about largely an augmented reality play where you're able to dial in and see the view of someone through a wearable pair of glasses or headset and help them to perform a maintenance task or a training task relating to a piece of complex machinery. The retail and consumer space, aside from the more obvious stuff around video gaming, we've also got consumer experiences. So by that, I don't only mean the ability for the public to be further engaged in live concerts and sports events. That's quite interesting in itself, particularly in the current COVID-19 crisis where we can't go anywhere physically and these matches can't take place. We're seeing them take place using video gaming technologies, and when they are allowed, when the athletes are allowed back onto the pitch again, we can expect to start to see them using virtual reality technology as well. Now, the interesting thing is in retail and consumer, you also have the ability for us to understand consumer behaviors by creating a virtual reality environment as well. So lots of different interesting areas there. I can answer questions on any of those specifics as we go on. But the big picture here is that each of these buckets is going to have a significant impact, positive contribution to the global economy in terms of VR/AR technology assisting. And you can see the numbers at the bottom of each section there. That relates to the VR and AR impact on the global economy by 2030 in each area, and is in decreasing order from left to right. So product and service development leading at $359.4 billion contribution globally, followed by healthcare, development and training, process improvements, and retail and consumer. So all of that adds up to a $1.5 trillion boost to the global economy by 2030. And that is split between AR and VR roughly in a 2-to-1 ratio. So augmented reality is we expect is going to be worth a little bit more than double the contribution to the global economy than virtual reality. That is not to say that AR is better than VR in any way. They are both different technologies with different use cases. And finally, we produced a global view here with a couple of select countries, and also talked about figures relating to how much these technologies are going to enhance employment in terms of the number of jobs enhanced by virtual reality and augmented reality across the world. And we've selected these few nations here as good indicators or good illustrations of the value of this technology. The US leads globally in terms of its impact. We're talking about a $537 billion contribution to the global economy. Within Europe, we've got big powerhouses like Germany and UK leading. And then, of course, we have China and Japan in East Asia leading over there. Now, I'm going to skip ahead because we don't have a lot of time here. But interestingly, virtual reality and augmented reality have been used in so many different ways in so many different organizations and industries. In fact, what I like to say is that there is not a single industry that virtual reality and augmented reality doesn't have an application in. And I want to give you some examples now of how we've used VR and AR in organizations. This particular picture you can see now is of a conference we ran in Toronto, and it was with nearly 300 people, where we put them in the middle of a cybersecurity crisis simulation. The idea being there that cybersecurity is a big topic in the world, and we wanted to help business leaders understand what it's like to be in the middle of such a crisis. And virtual reality is a fantastic way of doing that. This was an interactive experience built on 360 video technology, and all networked together. So I had a tablet in that room, and I was able to click a button and activate all 300 headsets. I could then see in real time what decisions they were making, what directions they were taking in the experience, and that data was collected by me in real time and presented to them on the big screen in front of them as soon as they took off their headset. Then we have this application here around analyzing consumer behaviors through virtual reality simulations. This is all about helping to understand, in this case, the views of a home buyer. So somebody who is interested in buying a new home, where they would go, what path they would take throughout that environment when they were exploring it, whether they started in the kitchen, the bedroom, and where they went from one room to another. We asked them questions. We were able to see what they were looking at and for how long they were looking at it. And all of that recording of their interaction was saved as a file on the headset locally, which we could analyze using traditional tools like Excel. And this was using volumetric capture technology at the Microsoft Dimension studio in London, where we actually captured a number of colleagues in PwC, and we were able to import their models into the physical environment. This is a screen grab of of my mobile phone in our office in London, and this is a 3D model of one of my colleagues, and the fidelity of the graphical model is quite impressive, and we use this here to deliver communications to our workforce. And then finally, this is around deploying enterprise soft skills training in virtual reality at scale. This particular product is around inclusivity training, and you're able to have a conversation with this digital avatar around how you would proceed with a new client project and how you would resource the team on that project. We also conducted this exact same training in the classroom and via an e-learn, and got some very interesting results. We found that VR-trained employees demonstrated 340% more confidence in what they do versus traditional e-learn methods, and also that they required less time to learn in VR. So VR-trained students required 53% less time than classroom trainees and 33% less time than their e-learning counterparts. So a little bit of a whistle-stop tour there through a number of case studies in the Seeing is Believing report. If you want to hear more about that, just head to pwc.com/seeingisbelieving.
Jeremy, that's really helpful. Thank you so much for that overview. There's a lot to unpack. I guess I want to start with, you mentioned VR versus AR, and we are, we're looking, a lot of people have asked us this, not only during this show, but also last time. The emphasis so far has really been on the AR ecosystem, because like the dawn of the iPhone, a lot of people think, hey, this platform really works very well for mobile, and without a headset, it's not necessary. But now with social distancing, the emphasis seems to have shifted. Does that also shift some of your prognosis and the outlook for VR generally, or do you think it's still going to be the same?
No, to be honest, the current crisis, as much as it seems like it's going to be a forever thing and never going to end, if we look at human history, humans have been incredibly resilient. We've always come back from everything that's hit us in the past, and we have no reason to believe that it will be any different this time with the current crisis. So, in other words, our predictions are still valid in our view. Augmented reality we see as being a bigger market, and will be a bigger market by our estimates than virtual reality. And the reason for that is, as you say, everyone has got the default technology in their pockets now. We've all got mobile phones with this ability to run high-end augmented reality scenarios, And also, when you think about the use cases that apply to AR, they are everything to do with the real world. And currently, we have a lot more applications for items in the physical world than we do for things in the virtual world.
Right. So, I mean, I am seeing a big emphasis, and that's precisely why, is that in the near term, we absolutely need to collaborate more effectively. And some of these are cross-platform. So, for example, if you just happen to have a pair of Magic Leap glasses at home, you will be able to communicate with somebody who has a Vive or one of the other more sophisticated headsets on certain platforms. Now, talk to us too. Now, I think we were introduced was about 5 years ago. It was the first time when we were introduced for the first time, and your practice was up and running. But obviously, it's not at the success and the international presence that it has today. Talk to us about the trajectory internally, about getting people on board and really making the case for VR, maybe from your own experience or working with clients.
Sure. So making the case for VR has been a long campaign. It's been definitely a few years in the making. But the important
we're all in the same boat.
The important lesson there that I would impart to others is that if you do believe there is value there, find a way of articulating it in the same language as the stakeholders you're talking to. So in my case, a lot of companies want to see, what is the return on investment? And that's not an easy question to answer a lot of the time. However, there are other ways of going about that. If you can't show historical results on exactly the use case you're promoting, if you can't show analyst expectations, or if it's not as relevant or interesting to your stakeholders, then what you could propose is a small prototype. So at a small cost. So something that's not going to break the bank, but is enough in a form of a pilot stage to show some initial value with a small population of users, the results of which you can then use to show the value and extrapolate on a much larger scale and hopefully get buy-in for further investment.
Jeremy, that brings up an interesting point. I work with a number of creative technologists in New York and also Europe. So if ever I need to create a prototype, it's easy for me to pick up the phone and say, hey, I know a guy who specializes in just that. How do you identify your partners and how do you and what does that relationship look like?
So we have a dedicated research division, and that division is aim is to go out there and to find vendors, products, services relating to virtual reality and augmented reality, as well as related technologies, because another issue we have sometimes in the industry is we tend to think of VR and AR in silos, when in fact we should be thinking about how they converge with other technologies to provide even more value. So our research division basically investigates, explores, experiments, and unpacks a lot of the companies, organizations, and products that are out there, so that we're always at the cutting edge and understand what solutions would be best in what purposes and what use cases.
I completely agree, because in fact I did a presentation which I posted the other day. It was called XR Back to Business, and it showed the convergence in how you can actually be much more effective by using multiple technologies together, especially now with 5G and AI. And actually, I think that's going to bring me the question next to Pearly Chen, who is our next guest. I'd like to thank you very much, Jeremy. I'm going to bring you up in a minute. Right now, I'd like to introduce Pearly Chen, who is the head of business development VP of business development at HTC. Pearly, welcome. So Pearly, I was saying earlier that when I was marketing technology investments globally, I spent a lot of time in Taiwan, and that's when I first became familiar with the HTC brand. It's a huge conglomerate and with many moving parts. For those of us in XR, we are very familiar with the HTC Vive, which is the gold standard for enterprise and location-based entertainment. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about some of the use cases that you've created. I know that you've worked with some very large companies, and talk to us about how that went and how successful it was. Sorry.
Hello.
There we go. Sorry about that. I was like, why isn't she talking? She's usually so bubbly.
No problem. Should I dive straight into my 10 minutes?
Sure, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay, so hi everyone. It's good to be here with you on this LinkedIn Live event. So today I have a very short period of time to share with you what we've been up to at HTC Vive along this interesting journey of VR and AR. So of course we have to start with the brand because you always start with why. When you look at this familiar logo of HTC Vive, you see an equilateral triangle. What that means to us is to converge the best of technology innovation with humanity to unleash human imagination. I've worked side by side very personally closely with the founder, chairwoman, and most recently CEO of the company. And I know how important this why is in our day-to-day business and how we make decisions. And that's why I wanted to share that with you. Of course, we are known to be on the forefront pioneering in VR, AR spatial computing space, but we've equally made significant investments in the spaces of 5G networks, and AI, in blockchain technologies as well. Whatever these advanced technologies are, we see them all converging together. You touched upon convergence a little bit a while ago, but all that technology is meant to converge with the best of our humanity to unleash human imagination. That's why we created Vive and HTC Vive and this VR technology. So a little bird's eye view over what we do here at Vive. Of course, we are very much known for our cutting edge headsets. You will be familiar with some of these headsets that you see here. Yes. Okay, so hardware, consumer, prosumer, enterprise grade products. We ship them globally to consumers at home and business users around the world to create value using this cutting edge technology. But we also have a content and platform business that distributes the best in class content for consumers and enterprise globally. We also have an early stage investment program that has invested in over 100 early stage companies using VR and AR to various extents of applications, very global and fast growing portfolio. So we've really seen a broad and deep portfolio of how the most innovative companies and dreamers and enterprise applications are using VR and AR to create value, and for consumers as well at the forefront. Today I was asked to touch a little bit more about on the enterprise side of things. So I'll introduce maybe 2 or 3 use cases where we see very easy to understand value. One is Bell Helicopter. You might know Bell Helicopter as a aircraft maker pioneer that has really pioneered some of America's first jet fighter, or the first helicopter that broke sound barrier. What we work with them on this case study is to use virtual reality to work on digital mock-up of this FCX1 product and bring it to market 10 times faster than their traditional methods. Usually bring R&D and bring a helicopter, an aircraft from idea to market is a 5 to 7 years process. It's a very expensive, very long process of prototyping and mock-ups and a lot of back and forth with all stakeholders. Every delay can mean loss of millions of dollars in value. And what they did with this very advanced concept of FCX1 was to task the innovation team with using VR to use an entirely digital mock-up process to build this idea and concept in VR, to do the entire design and engineering and user review and pilot demonstrations in VR before even building one part. And as a result of this model was brought from a prototype to reality to be unveiled at their important trade shows within 6 months' time. So that's more than 10 times time saving and clearly millions of dollars of value created just like that. So that's a very sort of easy to understand example of using virtual reality for spatial understanding of design, engineering review, saving tremendous time and value and cost, and making it much easier for collaboration and creativity process to come to fruit. Another example, we can look at BMW, one of our close partners in the automobile space as well, that uses our cutting edge precision eye tracking hardware called Vive Pro Eye to create a very immersive customer journey. So the showroom, right, there are the thousands of different configurations and combinations that customers cannot possibly see in one physical showroom experience. But by using virtual reality and precision eye tracking, this immersive journey of configuring your dream car of different colors, texture, different combinations, as well as test driving and testing how this car ergonomically fits you, has become a much easier, much more cost-effective, and much more engaging experience. What the precision eye tracking of Pro Eye brings you is also a foveated rendering advantage of not requiring more graphic processing power, but being able to focus all the visual quality on where users' eyes are focused, blurring out the peripheral to bring forward the most amazing quality of visual quality. And that's what partners like BMW is looking for when they present a premium car like M5 to their customers. So that eye tracking also, I think Jeremy mentioned a little earlier, it brings unprecedented business analytics information for businesses as well, in where users engage most and where they don't engage. And this type of analytics can really help businesses make important product marketing and go-to-market decisions. So another clear example is on the virtualization or visualization space. This is another partner we work with to use precision eye tracking for foveated rendering, as well as real-time, high-fidelity graphic rendering of real estate properties to sell that, which enable them to help property developers sell thousands of residential property units before anything is built. Traditionally, they rely on physical mock-up houses, and these are extremely difficult and expensive endeavors to build these physical mock-up houses. But in VR, they are able to quickly and scalably create a digital twin of every single property, thousands even in the same residential property project, to their prospective customers, that is able to go through the entire property layout, see the light changes, and change the configuration of furnishing and everything, and help them to really experience what their dream home looked like before even stepping into a physical mock-up or before the project is actually built at all. So this is another example of seeing how virtual reality in terms of virtualization can bring a low-cost and high-efficiency way to engage customers in their experience. So I think I have a little bit time left. We can talk a little bit about how we're coping with the current situation. It really is acceleration of virtual lifestyle adoption, isn't it, for all of us? This is a meeting collaboration product we built really initially for our own purpose, for all of our studios and teams around the world to collaborate together. It's called Vive Sync. So it's a virtual reality meeting collaboration platform where you can bring meeting participants together and collaborate on 2D, 3D, big screen, all kinds of different models, and feel like you're together real time through voice, through presence, through lifelike avatars, and overcoming the physical distance and time zone differences, being together at the same space. And that's really tremendously helped us on making sure that we continue to feel connected to our colleagues and keep up with our productivity. So ViveSync is now open for private betas. You have to be invited to try this, and we're looking to roll this out to our close partners so that they can benefit from this solution that we built for ourselves as well. Another thing that we try to do amid this crisis is virtual conferencing. So we used to host our annual developer ecosystem events in different parts of China. This year, clearly, that could not happen in person. So we partner with different partners to bring together the virtual Vive ecosystem conference fully in virtual reality. And we're really surprised to see more than 2,500 concurrent users joining from all over the world. More than 80% of them via a headset, but also plenty joined from PC, mobile screens, and their browsers. So we decided that this would be a very interesting offering to work with different event organizers to bring virtual conferencing to life. That enables not thousands of participants participating at the same time, enables one-to-many keynote style, panel style, one-to-one interaction in a meeting style, in the virtual environment, as if it was physical, but also a lot of virtual wonders that would not be possible in real life at all. We can do that in virtual reality. A little bit of this is my last slide to wrap up in the human way, is that we use this Vive event solution yesterday to help Alvin, our China president, to host his daughter's birthday party in virtual reality. This is his first time that he's not physically with his daughter for her birthday because of COVID travel restrictions. He was able to recreate their home environment in Washington State, and then be there together from families from around the world to have virtual cake and virtual celebrations and really be together. This really is the next best thing without actually being able to be together physically. So I think going back to the initial introduction of using the best of humanity and technology to unleash human imagination. So the solutions we're trying to provide here is be for consumers entertainment or for enterprises productivity. It's all with the same thought of making sure that we better societies by furthering that human connectedness, especially in this time of crisis. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Pearly. That was really great. There's so much to unpack. I want to start off with the last bit because that's the most exciting. You just announced this last week, and I know that your 4-hour online conference was just something that people can find via the internet, is available, accessible to all, where you talk about how the different use cases across industry. So let's start off with the fact that you've got 1,500 people, 2,500 people live. Was it the total?
Yes.
And it was cross-platform, which I like a lot too, because a lot of people say, yeah, but we haven't got the headsets yet. Or, by the time we order Quest Survives for everybody or some sort of cardboard even, it's almost like everybody turning up in different forms of vehicles to this platform. The platform is separate from the headset. So am I understanding properly?
Most of the solutions we're building is hardware agnostic. We try to reach as many hardware owners as possible, not just 5 years.
Okay, because a lot of people will say initially we probably want to get the expensive, your Rolls-Royce products in-house, but then if we're having to work socially from a distance, it's almost like providing your clients with a cell phone to conduct business. Is that the way you see us headed, where everybody's going to have some sort of interactive device going forward?
I think it's sooner or later. In the interim, the bridging is clearly being able to access via your flat screens, because everyone has one. So our virtual conference access via browsers, YouTube Live, mobile phones. So of course that's not the full body immersive experience that you would get in VR, but it's a taste of what it would be like. So one of a successful example of VR chat as a social VR platform has done this really well. Clearly, not enough people in the world have headsets just yet, but by allowing PC and mobile participants really increases a conversion as well and curiosity in VR, and allow more people to join in this.
I completely agree, and I feel like I know that you have the inside out tracking technology, so you can see people from inside VR and you can get a sense of what's happening around you. But if you haven't got that, at least you can track around, you can move it around on your screen and see people. I also want to mention something that you mentioned, rich data, and there's a lot of conversations around the kind of what Zoom just had a problem recently because they were selling people's personalized data. And Jeremy also talked about security breaching before. How do you feel about the selling people's data in VR? Because some people say that it's because it is such a richly emotive medium that maybe they get more data than traditional social media.
So we definitely don't.
Any thoughts on that?
We definitely don't sell any user data in any form at all. The data for inside-out tracking is for capturing your environment to be able to track precisely where your head moves and to ensure a smooth experience. But that data is entirely.
Or to see other people around you, so you don't bump around during an experience. So if you're you can sense where other people are.
Say again.
I said, or you can sense where people are, so that when you're in an experience, you know that there's someone standing to your left or to your right, because you can kind of get a sense of where they are. But that's what it's for.
Environment. but no user data is captured or named or sold in any way, and that's probably also a reason why our emphasis on data security is appreciated by business customers. That's very much
Right.
specified in our end user agreement. So yeah.
But when you do design it, you can ask for the eye tracking data and the heat mapping so that people understand, because that's a common feature that most headsets can provide. But obviously, with the HTC Vive, it's at a different level.
Right, for precision eye tracking. That doesn't, Viper Eye would be the first commercial grade integrated eye tracking commercial headset that would provide that level of eye tracking data for business analytics and foveated rendering.
Now we talked. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag, so please excuse me. We talked earlier too about. You mentioned I'm trying to go back to the beginning of the presentation when you talked about experiences. Oh, it'll come back to me. So 5G is a catalyst for VR adaptation. Can you talk to us about how you feel that that's going to help move along the adoption of VR and how that's going to change the rendering and production values?
Absolutely. So 5G will change the game because of its super high bandwidth, super low latency, which are both very important characteristics for VR, for a comfortable VR experience. And for the operators that we work with around the world to invest in billions of dollars laying these 5G networks, there needs to be a ROI, our favorite word, to really monetize this new high-speed network. And it's not going to be just more Netflix streaming. And VR or move to be able to move some of the high graphic processing power that is now today living in the device level, hence the higher cost of access to the edge of the network, to the cloud, would vastly improve the affordability and accessibility of the headset, because essentially you're just wearing a screen or display, and most of the rendering and processing can be done in the cloud, in the edge. That really taps into the potential and the high value use case for the 5G network. So I think 5G with VR will undoubtedly unleash a lot of this possibility to make sure that highly affordable, accessible, lighter form factor, more desirable headsets like the ones we've teased recently will become a reality in the near future.
Fantastic. Listen, we talked about, somebody just sent us a comment, and by the way, this is live, so if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send them over. We can't see them directly on our screen, but I will be checking the stream as we speak. But we did get one question about some of the of use for prototyping. I thought the numbers that you mentioned earlier at the beginning of your presentation were really very effective. You mentioned that the cost savings of building a helicopter, and it occurred to me, a lot of the pushback that we get is that, how can we really see a project from beginning through fruition with these collaborative tools? Is it lifelike enough for us to do that? And I think if you can get a helicopter off the ground, surely, risking actual lives and expensive machinery, we can surely get some projects completed. What are your thoughts about really convincing people internally and getting projects off the ground?
I think it doesn't take any convincing because the cost saving is so significant and it's so instantly validated that there's no dispute that VR for virtualization and design engineering process needs to be leveraged because the dollars are really there. It's not just helicopter manufacturing; it's even auto manufacturers, the cars manufacturers, BMWs and the Fords of the world. They have also really seen the value of using VR instead of clay models to put together physically what the car should look like and manually adjust them. That's expensive manual process that you need to fly a lot of people from around the world to be in the same place, versus when you go into a virtual environment, you can jump in to a headset from anywhere, and you can be in a very realistic model virtual environment and collaborate real time. In fact, that's what Ford is currently doing in this lockdown situation that they shared the case study recently to be able to stay productive and more productive than being in person together and save a lot of money and time.
Yeah, I actually think that I wanted to touch back about your conversation convergence, because you mentioned that this was very good at mapping the spaces. And are you using something like, a lot of us map with Microsoft Connect or photogrammetry? How do you map the space and integrate that into the space so that you can adopt those assets? Or do you have separate teams that do that?
So there are a lot of different techniques for creating virtual environments, clearly with game engines, with volumetric capture that Jeremy also mentioned, with live field that's even next level, with 360 productions. But the most commonly seen that is both beautiful and cost effective today would be using the game engines to recreate these 3D assets, 3D environments, and sometimes they can be rendered extremely realistically, like the virtual real estate walkthrough example that I showed. It's almost as if it was photos, but they're not, because they're freely 6 degrees of freedom. You can walk around them. They're game engine render, real-time rendering technologies like Unity and Unreal Engine provide remarkable tools for building virtual environments and experiences.
Okay. Now, I see that Jeremy is... Okay. I'm going to try to unmute Jeremy so we can bring him into the conversation. So I wanted to ask, what are your views for, if we go back to your outlook, Jeremy? I couldn't quite read the bar charts, but from a previous part of our conversation, it looks like we're headed into 2020. I mean, how would people get on board for this if they were to call either one of you tomorrow and say, hey, we're interested, but they haven't got a headset, they haven't really had much experience? What does that onboarding and project management arc look like from your perspective? Anyone can address it.
Yeah, sure. I can give it a go. So it depends on what solution or what problem they're looking to solve, really. And sometimes, to be honest, virtual reality and augmented reality may not be the right solution. But where we've identified that it could be of value to them, the next stage is about co-collaborating with them, us sharing our experiences and our views on where the technology has been used before, how valuable it has been in the past for the sort of use cases that they're looking at, and then forming an opinion on what we could do for them in a similar case. Now, that design aspect, thinking about how this would run, what sort of software we would create, as Pearly is saying, what sort of content it would take the form of, whether it would be volumetric, 360, pure computer generated graphics, and how we would then deploy that. Because you've got to think about all the stages. A lot of people think virtual reality and augmented reality is about the software development, but the software development is just one piece of the puzzle. Before software development becomes understanding the technology, designing the solution, and not only designing the software, but also designing how you're going to deploy it as well. Then comes development, then comes the deployment. And this is actually getting people on the ground, putting the headsets in the hands of the workforce, whether it's a one-to-one model or whether it's one headset for many people. And then even once you've integrated that and helped to manage the change in that organization, because there's a lot of change with moving from a keyboard and mouse to a virtual reality device. It's also analyzing that change in that project and in this debrief stage to understand how successful has it been, and based on those results, what should we do as a next step?
Jeremy, I want to jump in before we get to Pearly. I want to say thank you for that, because I think you can't automatically conclude that VR or AR is necessarily the solution. Again, in my white paper about virtualization strategies, I really talk about what's the end goal and really mapping it out from there and identifying the tools that you'll need along the way and the partners. And so that's why it's so valuable to have people like you and Pearly who can help guide in the process, and teams like my company who help do precisely that. Pearly, I wanted to ask you about. Well, first, I just said we had a very serious question about how your Alvin Gray ate the virtual cake, but we also wanted to talk to you about the arc of bringing people on board for a virtual conference, because in normal conferences, even a TED Talk, which seems to have the same black standard background, there are considerations like special lighting and the audio. Obviously, spatialized audio is traditionally what's used in VR. But for VR conferences of that type, talk to us about the production value of something of that scale.
Right, and it was actually really not all that difficult. So we can make personalized avatars very easily based on the smartphone picture. So you take a selfie, we can make a 3D model of your avatar. You can personalize your fashion, and that's how we did our CEO, chairwoman, and our keynote speakers of Peter Diamandis, Tom Furness, and Alvin Grayling, and many others. So we make a virtual 3D representation of them. They can either perform the sessions live or use a voice recording and then we will make the 3D avatars come live with hand gestures and other good stuff. And this is the one-to-many keynote style. We can clearly also do the same for a panel style or in virtual meeting rooms for one-to-one type of interactions. And as everyone joins this conference with the virtual representation of themselves, either as a more simplistic version or a more sophisticated version, you can teleport around the venue and you can run into people like you would in physical conferences. And you can use your voice and your avatar and your hand gestures to interact as if you were together. Right. Sharing a virtual cocktail. So all of that is possible. We've been doing a lot.
Or real ones, even if it's virtual.
Huh?
Or real ones, even if it's virtual, they'll be able to see each other.
Right, and we can do a lot of virtual wonders. Like we have Blue Angels soaring over the Bay Area skyline, and for the amphitheater audience that we had in the keynote sessions, things that you wouldn't have in real life can be possible in virtual reality. So for events, this is clearly a very new offering or service that we think could be helpful to conferences around the world. For any inquiries, please contact events.com. So we'll hope to find a few good partners to accelerate this very forward-thinking way of doing virtual conferencing.
Can you imagine this also would be applicable to sports and to concerts? Is that something that, a natural ancillary to this product, service offering?
We've seen a lot of attempts in that space, NextVR being one, recently rumored to have been acquired by Apple. So
Apple, 100 million, right.
Right. The technical limitation is still clearly there with 360 type of image capture. The visual quality is still, of course, very low compared to what you're used to watching on your TV, and the interactivity is still fairly limited. So I think technology limitation, while they still exist, live events and concerts and sports events is probably not the best showcase of VR's potential today. But there are many others.
But I believe but this is, I think, a lot of people are thinking that going forward, this is something that's going to be a natural offshoot of the offering of the global, say, even broadcasting package is interactive television, as well as having access to sports both online in 3D with multiple panels where they can see, let's just say, the historical track record of a specific player or the number of runs. I'm not much of a sports person, but you can get the idea of having a dashboard around you simultaneously to really absorb the full impression, as well as being virtually in, say, a Madison Square Garden or a Madison Square Sphere, instead of paying, say, $400 for a ticket plus airfare. And I can see that as being a very good ancillary revenue stream for places whose doors may very likely be shuttered over the next 6, 12, 18 months.
For sure. I think that there can be different iterations and manifestations of live events in virtual reality. Of course, there will be give and take, right? There's no 100% replacement. Maybe in some aspects it will be better than real life. In other aspects, it will not. And oftentimes at this point in our industry, it's about convincing people that there's a value to put on the headsets. So in instances where you still think the sort of watching a TV with friends and beer in hand is a better experience, it's a harder sell. But in other instances where it's not possible right now, or where it does provide an enhanced experience compared to real life, then yes, there's a real proposition there.
So I feel like, I've talked a lot about new platforms as we look at this new reality. And we will be seeing, like last week, we had Justin Bolognino of Meta talk about his new platform, Unreality, which is basically going to be the new LinkedIn for XR and eventually also for XR talent and eventually also for XR live experiences. I feel like, HTC Vive is one of the default platforms people need to know about. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
About which?
The Vive platform for content.
Oh yes, Viveport. Thank you for saying that. So many people, but we do have a content platform business, as I mentioned. So Viveport is our portal for you to depart to endless worlds of possibilities, and that's our content platform. We offer an infinity subscription, which is like Netflix, a monthly all access pass to a well curated library of VR experiences for PC headsets, for all-in-one headsets, and for all headsets, not including non-Vive as well. So we've started this platform since the beginning, really since day one. This time around in this VR journey, because it's important. Content service, content production, all of these are incredibly important for us to dip our not just toes, dip our entire body in to be able to know what's possible, what buttons to push, what envelopes to push, to be able to share with the ecosystem.
Especially now that everyone's at home, they feel like they've seen everything on Netflix, and read the entire internet. Please know that there's an entire platform where all you have to do is put on the headsets and you can be literally transported around the world like my guests here today. I'd like to close up by asking Jeremy, you've had a sense of the view on the outside. Give us a view from Europe. How is everybody doing in terms of their relative adaptation? I know that Germany seems to be going faster than UK, which surprises me in terms of their AR, XR adoption rates, because the UK has such a rich media culture. And, from all of my partners, in the XR community that I work with there, they're almost further along the curve because VR was so heavily supported by the BBC and Sky TV. So, which markets are moving most quickly, and what's the view from your side?
Yeah, so in Europe, the UK is obviously a very strong player in the immersive industry for a number of reasons. One of those reasons is the fact that we have a very strong creative industry over here in terms of video gaming, and video gaming is incredibly important industry in the growth of virtual reality. The UK is the 5th biggest video gaming market in the world. And a lot of the talent that comes into developing innovative VR solutions comes from that industry. We also have government support in the form of organizations like Immerse UK, which help to connect both industry, academia, and the VR AR industry specifically together, and help them to grow and take advantage of those networks. We also have a lot of vendors, a lot of companies, and we did an analysis a few years back and identified, now it's in the thousands of companies that have some form of virtual reality or augmented reality product that they're either using or pushing out to the market, which is really a strong sign for the industry. Countries like Germany, on the other hand, they may not have the same strengths that the UK has, but they've got their own strengths in terms of their manufacturing industry, for example, or their heavy industries are very strong. Now, those lend themselves really well to augmented reality and virtual reality and taking advantage of the technology. So hence why you see a lot of our predictions when it comes to the Seeing is Believing report showing Germany at the forefront of Europe in terms of VR, AR economic impact. It's partly because of that, because that economic model takes into account all of these different industries and inter-country trading conditions. It's quite a complicated model, but we have a nice layperson's blog specifically on that point, actually, which I can provide a link out later.
I actually wonder if, since we're on the LinkedIn platform, if both of you could just give a shout out to some ideas about jobs. Now, I know that you both have platforms. If anybody's a creator and they have created something amazing, they could submit it for consideration by HTC. And if you are a service provider, you can contact PwC and and let them know that you exist and what sort of and how you might help. But looking at the bigger ecosystem as we evolve in the XR space, which is growing dramatically, XR is 209 billion according to markets and research, and the AR VR space is approximately $20 billion according to Statista for this year. So this is a huge it's a huge industry and growing at a compounded annualized growth rate of 77%. And I expect we're going to be seeing in the 90s and maybe even higher over the next year as the pressures evolve. So that means job opportunities. So maybe we could wrap up and give those people out in LinkedIn an idea as to some of the opportunities that we see coming along. Pearly, you want to start?
Yeah.
Or Jeremy?
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. So I see job opportunities in VR and AR in 3 areas. And in fact, you could probably apply this to technology in general. You've got the business side, the creative side, and the technologist side. So in the business side, you've got those like myself who are consulting on virtual reality and augmented reality, that are talking about the return on investment, building the business cases, having the stakeholder conversations, and so on, building the strategy. On the creative side, you have those who are more artistically inclined. Maybe they are on the graphics artist side. Maybe they're on the user experience design side. Maybe they're on the texturing side, animation side, 3D modeling side. And then finally, you have the technologist side. And this is the sort of engine room of the VR AR industry, where you have programmers, Unity, Unreal specialists who can really take advantage of the game engines that Pearly was talking about earlier and pull all of these pieces together to create the software at the end of the day.
I think Jeremy, you summed up pretty well, and we are looking for talent across those those areas for sure. So as we build out this ecosystem, as I mentioned in the beginning, we invest in companies, we build a content platform, we work with developers all over the world, we build technology and products. So really and we build content as well. And so across the board, the type of talents that you're talking about, we definitely are always looking for them as we as well as our ecosystem. It's not just us. We're not the only player. We hope to contribute to an important part, but there's so many companies that we work with, partner with, invest in the ecosystem that are always looking for talent on the business side, technical side, creative side, as you well mentioned, marketing as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, Pearly.
Sorry, Catherine.
There are 2 things I wanted to say. It's okay. Oh, yeah.
Just to say, because Pearly mentioned a good point there, and I should have said, we also do have a team involving all of those individuals. We have our own in-house set of software developers, and if anyone is interested in a role, feel free to reach out to me. I'm around on LinkedIn, or you can find me on the PwC site.
Well, I had the New York City Tech Creatives. It's about 3,000 people, so I'm going to post that on Slack to be sure. I did want to mention that's great because we do have one of the challenges I think is a dearth of content across a number of different verticals. And so as we look to develop these capabilities across the new verticals, we also need a lot more content that's really sector specific. And so I think that content creators can take heart that there's opportunity, even if they have sort of real world skills, that those can be translated into XR. And then if you haven't got those skills, many of the, whether it's the Adobe Suite or Unity or some of the other programming software are allowing you free access so that you can start learning some of the skills if you haven't got them already. So I do believe that this is a huge and growing industry, that we are just being catapulted forward. I'd like to thank our guests today, Pearly Chen from HTC Vive and Jeremy Dalton, for sharing their expertise. And I hope that if you've been inspired by this at all, feel free to contact any one of us with questions and to help us to help you get back to business. Thank you so much to you both.
Thank
I
you.
wish you, continued good luck and good health, and be well.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Kathy. Thank you, Jeremy.
Bye, everybody out there. Thanks for joining us.
Bye bye.